My parents refused to care for my twins while I was in emergency surgery, but what happened when my grandpa spoke left them speechless. My name is Myra Whitmore. I'm 34 years old, a cardiology resident, and a single mother raising 3-year-old twins alone. People think doctors have everything under control. We don't. Sometimes we're just exhausted people in scrubs trying not to fall apart in hospital parking lots. And 2 months ago, I almost died before I finally understood the truth about my family. It happened on a Tuesday night after a brutal 16-hour shift. Rain hammered against my windshield as I drove home through downtown Chicago. My head hurt. My back ached. All I wanted was to kiss my twins goodnight and sleep for 6 straight hours. The traffic light turned green. I entered the intersection. Then headlights exploded across my window. A truck slammed into the driver's side of my car so hard the metal folded inward like paper. Glass burst across my face. The world spun violently. Then darkness. When I opened my eyes again, sirens screamed around me. My chest burned every time I breathed. I tasted blood. Myra, stay with me. A familiar face leaned over me inside the ambulance. Dr. Marcus Smith, our physician, co-worker, one of the few people at the hospital who actually noticed when I skipped meals during shifts. You were hit pretty bad, he said carefully. Possible internal bleeding. I tried to move and nearly blacked out from the pain. Then panic hit me harder than the crash. My kids. Marcus checked his watch instantly. Where are they? With a babysitter, I gasped. She leaves at 8. His expression changed. It was already 7:14. 46 minutes. That was all I had before my twins would be alone. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. I called my father first. 4 rings. Then his irritated voice answered. Myra, we're busy. Dad, I whispered painfully. I was in an accident. I need surgery. Please can you and Mom watch Lily and Lucas tonight? Silence. Muffled voices. My mother speaking sharply in the background. Then, a laugh. Vanessa. Even half-conscious, I recognized my sister's laugh immediately. The line disconnected. A second later, my phone buzzed. Family group chat. I opened it with trembling fingers. My mother's message appeared on the screen. You've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. Figure it out yourself. I stared at the words, certain I was hallucinating. Then another message appeared from my father. You're a doctor. Stop acting dramatic. And then Vanessa sent one thing. A laughing emoji. That was it. A yellow laughing face while I lay bleeding in the back of an ambulance. Marcus saw my expression change. What happened? I turned the phone toward him silently. He read the messages. For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus looked genuinely angry. Not shocked. Angry. You need someone for the kids, he said immediately. I nodded weakly. Marcus handed me his phone without hesitation. Use mine. Yours is dying. I searched emergency nanny services while the ambulance flew through traffic. Every bump sent pain tearing through my abdomen. Still, I kept talking. Professional.
Calm.
Controlled. Yes, I need immediate overnight childcare. Yes, I'll pay emergency rates. Yes, triple is fine. I gave instructions for the babysitter handoff. Confirmed payment. Done in under 4 minutes. Meanwhile, my parents were probably choosing outfits for a concert. Funny how strangers sometimes save you faster than family. The ambulance doors burst open as we arrived at the hospital. Bright lights flooded my vision. Doctors rushed around me shouting numbers and injuries. Someone cut open my blood-covered sweater. Marcus squeezed my shoulder before they wheeled me towards surgery. Your kids are safe, he said firmly. I nearly cried from relief. Not because of my parents. Because of him. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Ruptured spleen. Internal bleeding. According to the surgeon, another 20 minutes, and I probably wouldn't have survived. I spent 5 days in the hospital recovering. 5 days staring at ceiling tiles. 5 days replaying that text message over and over in my mind. Not one call from my parents. Not one visit. Not even a fake apology. But every morning, The nanny service sent photos of Lily and Lucas smiling safely over breakfast. Strangers cared more about my children than their own grandparents did. And something inside me finally snapped. On the third night, I opened my banking app from the hospital bed. Then I looked at the automatic monthly transfers I'd been sending my parents for 8 years. Mortgage payments, insurance, repairs, bills. Over $3,000 every month. I had paid for nearly everything in their lives while they treated me like an inconvenience. My finger hovered over the screen for only a second. Then I canceled every payment. Every single one. After that, I blocked all 3 numbers.
Mom, Dad,
Vanessa. No speech. No warning. No dramatic goodbye. Just silence. And honestly, it felt peaceful. For the first time in years, peaceful. But 2 weeks later, someone knocked on my front door. And the person standing outside was the last person I expected to see. 3 sharp knocks echoed through my apartment. I froze in the kitchen. Lily sat on the floor coloring with broken crayons while Lucas stacked pancakes on top of each other instead of eating them. For one stupid second, I thought it was my parents. My stomach tightened instantly. I wasn't ready to see them. Maybe I never would be. The knocking came again.
slow.
Firm. Controlled. I walked carefully toward the door, still sore from surgery, and looked through the peephole. My breath caught. Silver hair. Navy overcoat. Sharp blue eyes that still carried the authority of a courtroom. Grandpa Thomas. I opened the door so fast I almost forgot the pain in my abdomen. Grandpa. Before I could say anything else, he pulled me into a hug. A real hug. The kind that makes you realize how touch-starved you've been. My God, he whispered roughly. Look at you. When he pulled back, his eyes scanned my face carefully. Not judging. Not dismissing. Concerned. Actually concerned. I came as soon as Eleanor told me, he said. Aunt Eleanor. My mother's younger sister. The only person in the family who ever questioned why Vanessa was treated like royalty while I was treated like background furniture. You shouldn't be standing this long, Grandpa muttered. Let me in before you fall over. Lucas peeked around the corner curiously. Who dat? Grandpa's entire face softened. Well, he said, kneeling slowly despite his age, you must be the young man keeping your mother alive. Lucas grinned instantly. Within 10 minutes, both twins were obsessed with him. Lily climbed into his lap like she'd known him forever, while Lucas proudly showed him toy dinosaurs missing half their tails. And watching that hurt more than I expected. Because this was what family was supposed to feel like.
Warm.
Easy. Safe. Not conditional. Not earned. Not transactional. Grandpa watched the twins play for a moment before turning serious again. Tell me exactly what happened.
So I did.
The accident. The ambulance. The text. The laughing emoji. The silence afterward. I expected anger. Instead, Grandpa became terrifyingly calm. The kind of calm powerful people get right before they destroy something. When I finished speaking, he removed his glasses slowly. Then asked one question. Do you still have proof? I blinked. Proof. The payments, he said quietly. All the money you've been sending your parents.
Oh.
I nodded slowly. Every transfer. I kept records. Good. Something cold flashed behind his eyes. Very good. I stared at him carefully. Grandpa, what are you planning? Instead of answering immediately, he reached into his coat pocket and placed an elegant cream-colored envelope on the table. Gold lettering. Formal seal. I opened it. Thomas Whitmore's 70th birthday celebration. Next Saturday. Location. Whitmore Estate. The whole family will be there, Grandpa said. His voice turned quieter. And for once, so will the truth. The next week felt like preparing for trial. Except I wasn't the lawyer. I was the evidence. At night, after putting Lily and Lucas to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table organizing 8 years of financial records. Mortgage payments. Insurance premiums. Emergency transfers. Credit card bailouts. Vanessa's fashion emergencies. Every dollar. Every sacrifice. Every ignored birthday. Every lonely holiday shift at the hospital while my parents vacationed with Vanessa. The final total made me physically sick. $364,200. I stared at the number for nearly 5 minutes. That was college tuition, a house, security for my children. Instead, I had poured it into people who called me a burden. Aunt Eleanor came over 2 days before the party. The second she saw the stack of paperwork, her face darkened. Oh my God. She flipped through the pages faster and faster. They let you do this? I offered. You offered because they trained you to believe your value depended on what you could provide. Her voice cracked with anger. Myra, this isn't support. This is exploitation. I leaned against the counter tiredly. I just wanted them to love me. The room went silent. Aunt Eleanor walked over and grabbed my hands. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. Good parents don't charge their children rent for affection. That sentence broke something inside me. Because, deep down, I knew she was right. The night before the party, I got a text from a cousin I barely talked to. Heard you're struggling mentally after the accident. Vanessa's been telling people you've become unstable. I stared at the message. Then another arrived. Aunt Helen said you're imagining things about the family. Then another. They're worried you're having a breakdown. I laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. Of course they were preparing the family before I arrived. If the truth threatened them, they'd destroy my credibility first. Classic Vanessa. Control the narrative before the victim speaks. But this time, they didn't know Grandpa Thomas was involved. And Grandpa Thomas didn't lose cases. Saturday arrived cold and gray. The Whitmore estate looked like something from an old political movie. Massive white columns. Luxury cars filling the driveway. Crystal chandeliers glowing through giant windows. Money.
Power.
Reputation. That was the world my parents cared about most.
And tonight?
That world was about to crack open. I parked slowly and looked at myself in the mirror. Simple navy dress. Minimal makeup. No designer labels. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here to stop hiding. From the back seat, Lily asked softly, Mommy, you okay? I looked at my children, then smiled. Yeah, I whispered. For the first time in a long time, I think I am. Before we continue to the birthday party disaster, I want to know something. If someone treated you like an option your whole life, would you still help them? And if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like and subscribe because what happens at Grandpa Thomas's party changes everything.
Fire.
The second I walked into Grandpa Thomas's mansion, I felt it.
The shift.
The whispers. The staring. Conversations paused for half a second too long before restarting again. My parents had already been talking. Crystal chandeliers glittered above the ballroom while waiters moved through the crowd carrying champagne trays. Everything looked elegant.
Perfect.
But underneath it?
Rot.
I adjusted Lily on my hip while Lucas held tightly onto my hand. Then I saw them. My mother stood near the fireplace in a cream-colored dress, laughing softly beside my father. And next to them, Vanessa, beautiful as always. Perfect hair. Perfect makeup. Perfect fake smile. The moment she noticed me, her expression flickered. Only for a second. Then the performance returned instantly. Myra, she said loudly enough for nearby relatives to hear. You came, like I'd been invited to brunch instead of emotional warfare. She leaned forward for an air kiss. I stepped back slightly. Her smile tightened. You look better, she said carefully. We were all so worried after your little accident. Little accident. I almost died. It wasn't little. I replied calmly. I lost nearly half my blood. Her face stiffened.
Oh.
Before she could recover, my mother rushed over dramatically. There you are, she cried. And then she hugged Lily and Lucas instead of me, not even pretending anymore. Dad approached more cautiously. You should have answered our calls. I stared at him in disbelief. You told me to figure it out while I was bleeding in an ambulance. His jaw tightened instantly. This isn't the place. Funny. People always say that when the truth becomes inconvenient. Before I could answer, Vanessa smoothly stepped between us. She's still emotional from the accident, she told a nearby aunt with a sympathetic sigh. There's been a lot of confusion lately. Confusion. That word hit me harder than I expected, because suddenly I understood their entire strategy. Make me look unstable before anyone hears my side. Smart. Pull. Very Vanessa. For the next 30 minutes, I watched them work the room. My mother quietly crying to relatives. Dad wearing his heartbroken father expression. Vanessa moving gracefully through conversations, planting little seeds. She's under a lot of stress. We're worried about her mental health. She stopped taking our calls. She thinks we abandoned her. Thinks? The text message literally existed. At one point, I overheard Vanessa whispering near the dessert table. Honestly, I think being a single mother finally became too much for her. A cousin shook her head sympathetically. That's so sad. I nearly laughed.
Sad? No.
Calculated. That's what this was. But the worst part? Some people believed them. Because charming people are dangerous. And Vanessa had spent her entire life mastering charm. I stood near the drink table trying to steady my breathing when a warm voice spoke beside me. Don't let them get inside your head. Aunt Eleanor. Sharp black dress. Sharper attitude. She handed me a glass of water. They've been calling relatives all week, she muttered. Preparing the battlefield. I noticed. You okay? I looked across the room at my parents smiling for appearances. Then at Vanessa pretending to comfort someone. And finally toward Grandpa Thomas standing silently near the staircase, observing everything like a judge studying witnesses before delivering a verdict. No, I admitted quietly. Eleanor squeezed my shoulder.
Good.
I blinked. What? You're finally feeling what you should have felt years ago. Her eyes softened. Anger isn't weakness, Myra. Sometimes it's self-respect waking up. Before I could answer, a spoon clinked against crystal. The entire ballroom slowly quieted. Grandpa Thomas stood near the center staircase holding a glass of whiskey. At 70 years old, he still carried the kind of presence that silenced rooms without effort. Every conversation stopped. Thank you all for coming, he began calmly. The crowd smiled politely. Normal birthday speech. That's what everyone expected. Then Grandpa's eyes found my parents. And before we celebrate tonight, he continued, there are a few matters I'd like to address. The room changed instantly. You could feel it. Dad's posture stiffened. Mom looked confused. Vanessa slowly lowered her champagne glass. Grandpa continued calmly. Family is built on truth. Silence spread across the ballroom. And unfortunately, some truths in this family have remained buried for far too long. Dad stepped forward quickly. Dad, he said tightly, maybe tonight isn't appropriate for this conversation. Grandpa looked at him without emotion. Interesting. The room went dead quiet. Because according to your daughter Myra, Grandpa continued, there never seems to be an appropriate time to discuss how she's been treated. A ripple moved through the guests. Mom immediately jumped in. She's misunderstood things. Grandpa raised one finger. And somehow that tiny gesture shut everyone up instantly. 40 years as a federal judge. The man knew how to control a room. I would like, Grandpa said calmly, to ask Richard and Helen a very simple question. Dad swallowed hard. Who's been paying your mortgage for the past 8 years? Silence. Actual silence. The kind so heavy you can hear glasses being set down across the room. Dad forced out a laugh. What kind of question is that? A direct one. Grandpa's voice sharpened. So I'll ask again. He slowly pulled a thick folder from inside his jacket. My folder. Who, he repeated, has been paying your mortgage? My mother went pale instantly. Vanessa's confidence cracked for the first time all night. And suddenly, everyone in the room realized something was very, very wrong. Nobody spoke. Not my father. Not my mother. Not even Vanessa. The ballroom had gone so quiet that I could hear the soft clink of ice melting inside someone's glass. Grandpa Thomas opened the folder slowly.
Calmly.
Like a judge reviewing evidence before sentencing. I'll help answer the question, he said. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at my father. Over the past 8 years, monthly mortgage payments totaling $230,000 were made from Myra Whitmore's personal bank account. Gasps spread across the room instantly. My father's face drained of color. Mom grabbed his arm. That's misleading. Grandpa ignored her completely. Additionally, he continued, health insurance premiums totaling $76,000. Another page flipped. Vehicle repairs, emergency expenses, home maintenance, approximately $45,000. Flip. Financial support for Vanessa's fashion business ventures. Vanessa suddenly spoke up. She offered. Her voice cracked loudly through the ballroom. Finally, the real panic was starting. Grandpa looked at her calmly. Did she? Vanessa hesitated. Wrong move. Or, Grandpa continued, was she conditioned from childhood to believe her value depended entirely on how useful she was to this family? Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I could literally feel the room turning against my parents inch by inch. My mother suddenly started crying. Real tears this time. Not performance tears. Thomas, please, she whispered. This is humiliating. Grandpa's eyes hardened. Humiliating? He slowly pulled out his phone. What I find humiliating is this. My entire body froze. Because I already knew what he was about to read. No, my father said instantly. Too late. Grandpa read directly from the screen. Myra, you've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. Figure it out yourself. The words echoed across the ballroom like gunshots. People looked horrified. Actually horrified. One aunt covered her mouth. A cousin whispered, "Oh my God," and then Grandpa delivered the final blow. This message, he said calmly, was sent while Myra was bleeding internally on the way to emergency surgery. The room exploded. What? You left her alone? She could have died. I can't believe this. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once. My father looked cornered for the first time in his life. We didn't know it was serious. Grandpa snapped toward him instantly. Did you ask?
Silence.
Did you call back? Nothing. Did you go to the hospital? My father lowered his eyes. And that silence answered everything. Vanessa tried to recover first. Of course she did. She stepped forward dramatically. You're twisting everything, she shouted. She always makes herself the victim. Myra has always been dramatic. That word again. Dramatic. I finally looked directly at her. No, I said quietly. My voice somehow carried across the entire room. I was convenient. Vanessa froze. So did everyone else. I slowly stepped forward, holding Lucas against my chest. For years, I continued, I convinced myself this family loved me differently. I looked at my parents. When you missed my medical school graduation because Vanessa had a fashion meeting, I understood. Mom started crying harder. When you skipped the birth of my twins because Vanessa was stressed after a runway show, I understood. My father looks sick now. When I worked 30-hour hospital shifts while sending you thousands every month. I swallowed hard. I understood. My voice cracked slightly. But lying in that ambulance changed something. The ballroom was completely silent again. I realized no matter how much I gave this family, I looked directly at Vanessa. I would never matter as much as her. Vanessa's expression finally shattered. For the first time in her life, she had no script, no charm, no audience control, just truth. Ugly truth. Then something unexpected happened. Uncle David stepped forward. A man who barely spoke at family events. He looked directly at my father. You took money from her for 8 years? Dad immediately defended himself. She's our daughter. Family helps family. Uncle David's face twisted with disgust. Family also answers the phone when their daughter is dying. That hit hard. More relatives started backing away from my parents physically now, like people distancing themselves from smoke after finally noticing the fire. One cousin shook her head at Vanessa. You laughed at her? Vanessa looked panicked. I didn't think. Exactly. Aunt Eleanor snapped loudly. None of you did. My mother suddenly turned toward me desperately. Myra, sweetheart, we made mistakes. Mistakes? Eleanor cut in again. Forgetting someone's birthday is a mistake. Ignoring your daughter while she bleeds internally is cruelty. Mom burst into tears again. But this time, nobody rushed to comfort her. That was new. Then my father looked at me with something close to anger. "So what now?" he demanded. "You embarrass us in front of the entire family and feel proud of yourself?" I stared at him quietly, and honestly, that question changed everything. Because even now, even after everything, he still thought this was about his humiliation. Not my pain, not the abandonment, not the years of emotional neglect. Him. I slowly shook my head. "I didn't come here to embarrass you." I took a breath. I came because for the first time in my life, someone finally told the truth out loud. Grandpa Thomas looked at me proudly, and suddenly I realized something. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been destroying them privately. This was exposure. And exposure feels cruel only to people who benefited from the lie. Then Vanessa whispered something that made the entire room go cold. "You're destroying this family." I looked straight at her. "No," I said softly. "The truth is." After I said those words, nobody spoke for several seconds. Not even the musicians in the corner moved. The silence felt heavy, final, like something inside the family had broken beyond repair. Then slowly, people started choosing sides. And for the first time in my life, they weren't choosing Vanessa. Uncle David walked directly past my parents without looking at them. One of my cousins hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm so sorry." Another aunt shook her head at my mother in visible disgust. "You told everyone Myra was unstable," she said sharply. "Meanwhile, she was financially carrying all of you." Mom tried to defend herself through tears. "We didn't realize." "You didn't want to realize," Aunt Eleanor snapped. Vanessa looked around the room desperately. Her perfect image was collapsing right in front of her, and she couldn't control it. For someone like Vanessa, that was worse than humiliation. It was panic. My father suddenly straightened his shoulders like he was trying to regain authority. "All right," he said tightly. "Clearly emotions are high." Nobody answered.
Bad sign.
He looked around the room. "We're still family. Whatever misunderstandings happened should remain private."
Private.
Another word people use when truth damages them publicly. Grandpa Thomas stepped closer slowly. "No, Richard," he said calmly. "What remained private for years was Myra's suffering." Dad's jaw tightened hard. "You're turning everyone against us." Grandpa didn't blink.
No.
"Your actions did that." That line hit the room like thunder. Even I felt it, because it was true. Nobody forced my parents to ignore me. Nobody forced Vanessa to laugh at that message. Nobody forced them to take my money while treating me like I didn't matter. Those were choices. And now everyone could finally see them clearly. Then something happened I never expected. My cousin Rachel walked toward Vanessa. "You told me Myra cut everyone off because she became paranoid after the accident." Vanessa swallowed nervously. I thought." "No," Rachel interrupted. "You lied." Vanessa's face went red instantly. And once one person challenged her publicly, others followed. "You said Myra was unstable. You said your parents paid for everything. You made her sound selfish." People started confronting them from every direction now. Questions, accusations, disbelief. The perfect image my parents built for decades was cracking apart in real time. Mom looked overwhelmed. Dad looked furious. Vanessa looked terrified. And honestly, for the first time ever, I felt nothing. No guilt. No panic. No desperate need to fix everything. Just exhaustion. Because I finally understood something important. Keeping peace at the cost of your own dignity isn't kindness. It's self-destruction. Grandpa Thomas eventually raised his hand. Instant silence again. "I think enough has been said for tonight," he announced calmly. Then he looked directly at me. "Myra, sweetheart, would you and the children stay for cake?" The softness in his voice nearly broke me, because that was all I had ever wanted. Not money, not praise, just someone choosing me openly. I nodded slowly. I'd like that. Meanwhile, my parents looked completely isolated now. No one approached them. No one comforted them. People barely even made eye contact. Vanessa grabbed her purse first. "We're leaving," she muttered. Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but for once, Even he knew he'd lost the room. Mom turned toward me one final time before leaving. Myra, please. There were 1,000 things inside that single word.
Guilt. Fear.
Embarrassment. Maybe even regret. But it was too late for quick apologies now. Because apologies without changed behavior are just another manipulation. I said nothing. And that silence hurt her more than shouting ever could. The three of them walked out together under dozens of watching eyes. The giant front doors closed behind them. And just like that, the performance ended. The atmosphere slowly changed afterward. People started breathing again. Talking again. But differently now. Honestly. One by one, relatives approached me. Not with pity. With understanding. A great-aunt squeezed my hand. We had no idea. A cousin looked ashamed. I thought you distanced yourself because you were successful. Another relative shook his head sadly. All these years they acted like Vanessa supported the family. I laughed quietly at that. Funny how lies survive when only one person stays silent. Grandpa sat beside me while the twins attacked birthday cake nearby. You okay? He asked softly. I looked around the ballroom. At the whispers. The broken image of perfection. The uncomfortable truth finally, sitting in the open. And strangely, I was okay. Not healed. Not happy. But lighter. Like I'd been carrying concrete inside my chest for years and finally set it down. I think so, I admitted quietly. Grandpa nodded once, then smiled slightly. Good. 3 days later, the fallout truly began. The family group chat disappeared completely. Several relatives stopped speaking to my parents. And rumors started spreading fast.
Not about me. About them.
Then came the first voicemail from my mother.
Crying. Begging.
Saying everything had gotten out of control. I deleted it. Then another message arrived from Dad. We need to talk about the mortgage situation. I actually laughed out loud at that.
Not.
How are you healing?
Not.
How are the twins? The mortgage? Even now, that was the priority. That was the moment I truly understood something terrifying. They hadn't just depended on my kindness. They had built their entire lifestyle around my silence. 2 months after Grandpa's party, my phone rang while I was finishing charts at the hospital. Aunt Eleanor. The second I answered, she sighed heavily. They're selling the house. I stopped typing. What? Your parents, she repeated. They can't afford the mortgage anymore. For a moment, I just stared at the computer screen. That house had been my childhood home. Christmas mornings. Science fair projects. Late nights studying alone at the kitchen table while my parents traveled with Vanessa. And the entire time, I had been the one secretly paying for it. When? I asked quietly. The listing went up this morning. I leaned back slowly in my chair. I expected satisfaction. Vindication. Something. Instead, I just felt tired. Because deep down, I realized something painful. My parents never actually built a stable life. They built dependency. On me. The changes came fast after that. Dad got a part-time job at a hardware store. Mom started bookkeeping for a local church. And Vanessa? That shocked me most. Apparently word from Grandpa's party had spread farther than expected. One of the guests had connections in the fashion industry. Suddenly Vanessa's perfect image didn't look so perfect anymore. A designer quietly dropped her collaboration. Then another. Within weeks, her business started collapsing. Funny how reputation matters when your entire career depends on appearances. One evening, Aunt Eleanor came over for dinner while the twins colored at the table. She's waitressing now, Eleanor said casually. I looked up. Vanessa? Eleanor nodded. At some rooftop restaurant downtown. I absorbed that quietly. Not because I enjoyed hearing it, but because it felt unreal. Vanessa had spent her whole life floating above consequences. And now reality had finally reached her. Eleanor studied my face carefully. You don't seem happy about it. I'm not. That surprised even me. I stirred my coffee slowly. I wanted accountability, not destruction. Eleanor gave me a small, sad smile. That's because you're not cruel, Myra. Maybe. Or maybe I just knew what it felt like to lose everything emotionally. And I wouldn't wish that emptiness on anyone. Not even Vanessa. That night after the twins fell asleep, I opened my laptop and reviewed my finances again. For the first time in years, I had money left over. Real money. The $3,200 monthly transfers were gone. So instead, I opened college funds for Lily and Lucas. Automatic deposits. Future security. Future freedom. My children would never feel responsible for buying someone's love. Never. And honestly, that felt better than revenge ever could. 3 weeks later, another unknown number called me late at night. Normally, I ignored them now, but something told me to answer. Hello. Silence. Then, Myra? Vanessa. But not the Vanessa I knew. Her voice sounded smaller. Fragile. Like life had finally stopped protecting her. Please don't hang up, she whispered quickly. I sat slowly on the couch. What do you want? A shaky breath came through the phone. I need to say something. I didn't answer. For a few seconds, all I heard was her breathing. Then finally, I'm sorry. Real silence filled the room after that. Not fake emotional drama. Not manipulation. Just raw discomfort. I was horrible to you, she continued quietly. And the worst part is, I knew it. That surprised me. What? I knew Mom and Dad treated you differently. Her voice cracked slightly. I just liked benefiting from it. That honesty hit harder than excuses would have. I kept telling myself you were stronger, she whispered. That you didn't need attention like I did. I closed my eyes. Because that sentence right there? That was the lie families tell themselves when they neglect one child. They're independent. They're mature. They're fine. Meanwhile, that child is drowning quietly. Vanessa started crying softly now. When you called from the ambulance, she whispered, I laughed. My chest tightened instantly. I know. No, she said brokenly. You don't understand. I keep hearing it in my head over and over. I can't sleep sometimes because of it. For the first time in years, Vanessa sounded human. Not polished. Not superior.
Human.
I'm not asking for money, she added quickly. Or forgiveness. I know I don't deserve either one. Then why call? A long silence. Because nobody's protecting me anymore. There it was. The truth beneath the apology. Vanessa had spent her entire life shielded from consequences by my parents. And suddenly she was alone. Just like I had been. You know what the hardest part is? She asked quietly.
What?
I think Grandpa was right. I frowned slightly.
About what?
That I only knew who I was when people were admiring me. Her voice broke again. And now that they're not,
I don't know who I am.
I sat there silently. Part of me wanted to stay angry forever. Honestly, I had earned that anger. But another part of me, the exhausted part, could hear genuine regret in her voice. Not perfect regret. Not healed regret. But real. Finally. What happens now? Vanessa whispered. I looked toward my children's bedroom down the hallway. Then answered honestly. That depends on what you do next. Silence. Then softly. I'm trying. And for the first time in almost a year, I believed her. Vanessa's words stayed with me longer than I expected. I'm trying. Not because they fixed anything, but because they didn't sound like a performance anymore. They sounded like someone standing at the edge of who they used to be, realizing they can't go back. Still, I didn't respond right away. Some silences are not punishment. They are space.
Space to think.
Space to breathe. Space to stop being who people trained you to be. Over the next few weeks, life slowly settled into something new. Not perfect. Not magical. Just quieter. The hospital became my routine again. Long shifts. Late nights. The smell of antiseptic and coffee that never quite tasted right.
But something inside me had changed.
I didn't overextend myself anymore. I didn't say yes automatically. I didn't fix things that weren't mine to fix. And strangely, nothing fell apart. The world kept spinning without me carrying everyone on my back. That realization alone was healing. One Sunday afternoon, Grandpa Thomas invited me over with the twins. His house felt different now. Less like a mansion. More like a place where I was allowed to exist without proving anything. Lucas ran straight into the garden. Lily followed, laughing. Grandpa sat beside me on the porch with 2 cups of tea. "You've been quiet," he said. "I've been thinking." He nodded slowly. "That's usually a good sign." I smiled faintly. "Sometimes I feel guilty." "For what?" "For walking away." Grandpa looked at me carefully. "That wasn't walking away," he said. "That was surviving." Those words settled deep. Surviving. Not betrayal. Not cruelty. Survival. A month later, I received a letter. Handwritten. From my mother. Not a text. Not an email. A letter. Inside, she wrote about regret. About memories she suddenly remembered differently. About things she wished she had done. There were apologies, but also excuses hiding between the lines. I read it once, then folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something important. Forgiveness does not mean returning to the same place where you were hurt. Vanessa called me again a few weeks later. This time her voice was steadier. "I got a small design job," she said. "That's good." I replied honestly. "I'm starting over properly this time." A pause. Then, "I don't expect us to be like before." "We can't be," I said gently. "I know." Silence. "But not uncomfortable this time. Just real." "Thank you for answering," she said. And then she hung up. No drama. No manipulation. Just acceptance of distance. 6 months after that, I moved into a new apartment. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms. A small kitchen. A balcony where sunlight actually reached in the mornings. But it was mine. No hidden obligations. No silent financial drains. No emotional debts disguised as family duty. On moving day, Aunt Eleanor helped me unpack. She looked around and smiled. "You look lighter." I sat down on the floor among the boxes. "I feel lighter." That was the truth. Not happiness. Not perfection. But freedom. That night, after putting Lily and Lucas to bed, I stood by the window for a long time. City lights flickered outside. Somewhere out there, my parents were rebuilding their lives. Somewhere, Vanessa was rebuilding hers. And for the first time, I wasn't responsible for either. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the financial safety net. I wasn't the emotional punching bag. I was just Myra, a doctor, a mother, a woman who finally chose herself. If there's one thing I learned through everything, it's this. Love that requires your destruction is not love. Family that demands your silence is not safety. And sacrifice without boundaries is just slow self-erasure. Choosing yourself is not betrayal. It is survival. And survival is allowed. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for staying with Myra's journey. And if this story made you feel something, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional stories like this.